What's going on, everybody? It's AG here. Today we're going to be ranking the 28 Days Later, 28 Weeks Later, 28 Years Later trilogy. I'm not sure there's a name for this trilogy, so we're just going to call them by their names. We'll go with the 28 Days trilogy for now because they're putting out a new trilogy. But got to see 28 Years Later last night. I'll give my thoughts whenever I get to that movie. There was a clear-cut number one for me on this list. 2 and 3 kind of juggled back and forth on where to rank those. Before we do move on, though, join me down in the comment section if you've seen all three of them. Rank them for me 3 to 1 in that order. Let me know why you liked whatever you have it won the best, and let me know your thoughts on 28 Years Later since it just came out. That one I'll kind of hold the spoilers since it just came out. I won't go into too much on 28 years, but 28 weeks and 28 days I'll give some spoilers on. But with that being said, let's go ahead and get started here. Coming in number 3, got 28 days. This is probably a hot take. 28 Days, I know, is kind of widely heralded as the obvious number one choice here, but maybe it was because this movie was so hyped up for me that I didn't like it. But this movie was a little bit of a letdown for me. And I'm a big fan of Cillian Murphy. Does a really good job. I like him in Batman, in particular as Scarecrow. Liked him in all the Christopher Nolan movies, Inception, Oppenheimer, you name it. And he's not bad here. This is an interesting concept. If you haven't seen this, it's essentially zombies, but infected as what they call them. They don't refer to them as zombies, but basically Cillian Murphy's in a coma, wakes up 28 days later, and basically, or I guess 28 days later, they don't really specify exactly how long he's in the coma, but wakes up and basically the streets are empty. Like you can kind of see on this picture here, and don't really know what's going on. The streets are empty. There's cars there, but nobody's there. So you kind of walk around and you get to learn what's going on in this world with the infected, how people get infected, how the people that have survived, and kind of what they do, how they turn you, stuff like that. But this movie was a bit of a letdown for me. Like I said, it's widely heralded as like the best zombie movie there is. And while he gives a good performance, while like Brendan Gleeson gives a good performance, the one thing I really didn't like about it was not a lot ends up happening. Yes, there's infected, but at the end of the day, it's kind of like the humans are the bad guys. And that's okay with a good premise to get there. But with the humans being the bad guys, you kind of don't get to see enough of the zombies or the infected. And it's a bit of a letdown for me. Worth the watch, I would say, for sure, but big disappointment. Now, maybe again, because my expectations were so high that I didn't like this movie, but it was a bit of a letdown for me. Number 2, got the new kid on the block, 28 Years Later. This movie, definitely worth the watch if you're thinking about going to watch it, but it's almost like 3 different movies molded in one, which is really frustrating here because the first half of this movie, you get to focus on like a father-son story with Aaron Taylor Johnson and his son, kind of a coming-of-age story. Basically, you've got a quarantine group is what we'll call them, but basically a community that has survived 28 years later, but they've regressed because they don't have weapons, so they're using like bow and arrows and stuff to hunt. And they're basically on an isolated island away from these zombies. And so basically the coming of age story, the rite of passage is basically when you become of age, like 15, 16, you go and kill your first infected. And that part of the movie, the first half, is probably my favorite part of anything in this franchise so far. You get Aaron Taylor Johnson gives a good performance. We'll get to everybody else, but a lot of good performances in this movie, but some stylistic choices and tone choices that just didn't sit well with me. The kid does a good job. I think his name's Alfie Johnson, maybe. He does a good job, but basically you get them going to, again, hunt his first infected. That part was awesome. You get a tremendous chase sequence in here with a zombie, or sorry, infected. I know they don't like to call them zombies. Infected chasing them. You get to see some of the world building as far as how the zombies have evolved throughout the 28 years, how the people have evolved and kind of different civilizations have evolved and what's kind of happened since we last saw this franchise. But the second half goes a completely different direction. I'm not going to get into that, but Jodie Comer gives a good performance. Ray Fiennes gives a good performance. But if the whole movie would have been like the first half, I think this would be the clear-cut number one. But the second half, while it's not bad, it's definitely worth the watch. You get used to it, but it's almost like 2 different movies. Like I'm saying, there's such a clear change in the movie that it doesn't even feel like the same movie. It feels like 2 parts in one. And while it's not bad, it's not quite a 28 Days Later movie. It feels completely different. You don't get to see a lot of the infected. And the infected, I don't know, I thought they'd go a little different direction. They didn't explain a lot as far as kind of why some of the things happen, why some of the choices in this movie happen that are questionable. I don't explain that. Maybe they will in future installments. But then the end of this movie, if you've seen it, I mean, what the heck are we doing? It had nothing to do with the rest. It felt like a different movie completely, which makes it feel like three movies in one. Uh, just I don't know, didn't sit well with me. The Until the very end, I was on board. Like again, even the second half was different, but even though it was different, I still found it enjoyable. But that very end of the movie just completely took me out of it. Made me laugh in the theater. Or that's how out of place it felt. Uh, we'll see if the Bone Temple can fix it, but I don't know. That I was pretty disappointed by this one, but I think that's because the first half was so great that it got my expectations way up, and then yeah, brought right back down to earth. All right, then number one, we've got 28 weeks. Probably kind of a shocker for some. I know this movie kind of gets crapped on a lot, but if you go back and rewatch it, it's a very rewatchable movie. More of an action movie, and you get to see the infected kind of unleashed in this one. You get to see an evolved species because it's a different type of translated. Basically, you've got a quarantine group, and from COVID, that'll kind of sit well with people because you'll be able to relate to it. But you've got a quarantine group that have been away from the infected, so nobody there is infected. These kids, this guy pictured, his kids get brought into the quarantine group. They escape one day, get back in, they're fine. But it turns out there's somebody that has basically an immunity, so they can't get infected. So, like, if a we'll call them zombies right now. If a zombie bites you, you can't get infected, but you can still pass on the virus if you accidentally like spit on somebody, for example. And so that ends up causing mass chaos because it spreads throughout this quarantine zone. Then you've just got people attacking each other, trying to survive. I really like 28 Weeks Later. And maybe it's because my expectations were low for this one that it ended up being better, that they exceeded it, maybe. But 28 Weeks Later, I thought it was pretty awesome. So that is my ranking of the 28 Days Later, 28 Weeks Later, 28 Years Later trilogy, franchise, whatever you want to call it. But what would be your rankings? What did you think of 28 Years Later? Let me know. Comment down below. Make sure to like this video. And most importantly, subscribe.